So you've come here for the truth. Well, we've got the truth and nothing but the truth. Here are your hosts, Robert A. Bianchi and David J. Bruno.
Welcome to WMTR Radio's Nothing But the Truth with your host, Bob Bianchi, Dave Bruno. It's two lawyers from New Jersey, but it's a show about mindset. Boy, we're blowing the mindset piece away, Dave. Your newsletter, I just started my inaugural newsletter. We got this show with great guests talking about mindfulness, making a difference in people's lives. Like, you know, I've always said, as a lawyer, you have an opportunity to improve the life of a person. It's not just about the law. And although the show is not about law, we do have a lawyer on today, but he's right up our alley, Dave.
Without a doubt. I mean, he's just like us. It's Dan Adams. He's a Wisconsin-based criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor.
Yeah, baby.
And the way that we met on LinkedIn, and really Dan has this awesome application called Justice Story. And he's got a great story to tell coming out of COVID, really developing this mitigation package tool for criminal defense attorneys to help tell the story and humanize their clients for prosecutors.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, does that sound familiar? Boy, Dan, before we have you, I just got to say to the audience that's out there, really respect what you're doing there. I said before we went on camera, when I was a prosecutor and as a criminal defense lawyer, to me, humanizing the client, giving the prosecutor all the information to put the person into context so that they can make a more informed judgment is a critical element to a successful resolution to what in reality is probably 95% of the cases that work themselves out by way of a plea agreement, and that je ne sais quoi between a really good plea agreement and not, in my opinion, begins with the mitigation package. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Dan, why don't you just give us a little background about the career and how you got to where you are first?
Sure. Well, I'm a fifth-generation Wisconsinite, and I'm the first lawyer in the family. And I started out after University of Wisconsin. I was a prosecutor in the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office, which is a huge office, 130 lawyers. They throw you right in, very little training. You get a big caseload, and the intent is to go in and do your best. And so that meant taking a misdemeanor caseload into court, trying cases without knowing how to try a case, and kind of learning the hard way. After that, I went to Carson City, Nevada, which was much different. There was 5 criminal prosecutors there, and we did everything. Milwaukee was very specialized. I did domestic violence cases. Carson City was very generalized. So in the morning, we would do traffic tickets. In the afternoon, we would do sex assault and homicide. So, you know, it was intellectually great to do both of those areas. After a couple years of prosecuting, 4 actually in total, came back to Milwaukee and decided to hang my own shingle as defender. That was about 14 years ago. And since then, I've been practicing here in state court in Wisconsin, in federal court. And during the pandemic, when our courthouses all closed down, which was, you know, debilitating for the whole country, but for lawyers who get up every day, put on their uniform and go into battle, it was really tough to sit at home and do nothing. And so I had this idea for a survey for clients. Often clients come into the criminal justice system, and the one thing that they really want to do is tell their story. And unfortunately, because how the criminal system is built, there's a lot of attorneys who their business model or their public defender model is based on volume. And so they're just working people through the system. Mm-hmm. And what these clients kept saying was, I need to tell my story. And so I built a software that I'd been thinking about for 4 or 5 years to allow attorneys to, hand the football over to a client early in their case and say, here's this survey. It'll take you about an hour and a half to do. It's all about your life. Tell me everything. Don't edit. Just give it all and let me learn about you. And it's been a tremendous success.
I mean, honestly, Dave, it's literally like taking the chapters right out of our lives, listening to this from the prosecutor's, point of view, and then as a defense lawyer. And of course, what I really love is a little bit of that entrepreneurial, aspect, kind of creating a business that is desperately needed, Dave, right? Because how much is mitigation important for us?
Well, sure. I mean, it is what we do as well. I mean, we've been doing this since we left the prosecutor's office in 2013. And just a little bit more about why that's important. You know, we were all prosecutors. And when I was a prosecutor, those files would come in like the mail. And they just stack up and stack up and stack up. And when we talk to new clients, we let them know about that process. Because prosecutors, when they get that file and they open up the file, they see a criminal history, usually on the left side with some notes, and they see the police reports and the witness statements and the photographs and all the things that support the probable cause that the police put together. And what they don't see is who this person is, right? So we're just like you because we know that prosecutors are making a decision. They have to decide, right? They have to decide how they're going to treat the case. What's the plea offer that they're going to extend? And we, the three of us collectively, and I know you're on the same page, we want to get that mitigation package into the hands of the prosecutor before they conclude or decide. Because human nature is it's hard to get people off a position once they decide. Now, it's possible, but earlier is better, Dan. We applaud you, man, for thinking about this the way we think about it and using the tools and technology to make this faster.
Yeah, well, I mean, human beings, we learn and retain knowledge and make decisions based on the narrative, right? Storytelling. We don't learn just facts, off a cue card. We learn about first came this, and then that caused the next thing to happen, which caused the next thing to happen. And narrative and storytelling is half of the trial attorney's job. We like to wake up and say, as trial attorneys, we like to think that we're going to trial to vindicate every case in front of a jury of 12 people. But as you said, Bob, 90% of cases maybe go to a negotiated plea and sentence where the discretionary decision makers, that's the prosecutor in court, and then ultimately the judge, comes up with the resolution for that client. And so as much as my self-narrative, when I wake up is I'm this, knight in shining armor that tries cases to juries, I had to divorce myself and kind of confront the reality of my practice, which was most of the storytelling that I'm doing for my client is in that negotiation and sentencing hearing context. Yeah. And so by deliberately creating a tool and a process to let clients tell their own stories, I was kind of pushing myself to be better.
There's a lot of psychology in this, and it reminds me of that Maya Angelou quote, "It's not what you say, it's not what you do, it's how you make people feel." And I've come through the same evolution. When I started as a young assistant prosecutor, we were trying cases where the jury would be deliberating and we were up doing an opening statement in another trial. The world is not that way anymore, through at least in New Jersey, and I'm betting pretty much throughout the country. Our clients should understand that because of the laws and the draconian nature of mandatory sentencing, and there's been a heavy emphasis on plea disposition. And so that's to your point where things are more, the narrative is more talking to the prosecutors and judges as opposed to a jury. And I think we only hire former prosecutors here, Dan, and that's because we do that because they know how prosecutors think. And I think it's really important. You talked about criminal claims adjusting. That's what we call it here, where people are just moving files from one drawer to another one. But it's also important in that narrative to convince the prosecutor that your client is worthy of a break, is worthy of mercy, and that they're not going to be back in the criminal justice system. And that's this narrative in mitigation, is it not?
Big time. And as you just explained, and Dave said earlier, I mean, imagine a judge or a prosecutor with all their files for the day on their desk. You can imagine these manila folders. I know they're digital now, but when we started, manila folders, 25, 30 deep for a day. What you want to do is have yours be the golden folder with something different in it. It's not just whining to the prosecutor, hey, he's a good guy. When I was practicing as a prosecutor, you would get treatment letters and letters of support shoved on you right before sentencing. Well, how are you supposed to make any type of decision, a lenient decision based on that? Creating a mitigation report well in advance of sentencing, having it in that prosecutor's file, filing it with the sentencing court well in advance makes your file stand out as kind of I'm going to do 20 cases today. But, Bob and Dave's client, this one's the really important one because they've obviously put the time in to learn about their client and articulate their life story.
That's exactly what we train.
Exactly. I love it. I love this topic.
It's even the same words.
Because look, like you said, discretion. There's discretion in this process, multiple levels. Especially when it gets to the prosecutor, they have the ultimate discretion. They could dismiss, they could plead, they could go to trial. There's a whole range of outcomes, And Dan, one of the things that I talk to prospective clients about as well is uncertainty. When these clients come through this criminal justice system, there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen in their lives, right? Their jobs, their family, finances, etc. And one of the best pieces of advice that we give is do what you can control. Take action, take immediate action and try to move forward in advance, especially in light of uncertainty. Getting the right attorney, number one. Remain silent, not giving admissions, number two. And I'll put the mitigation package and humanizing right next to those two as number three. Great idea as to create a program to do this and make it easier because oftentimes it is a labor-intensive process, Dan, right?
Big time. And, this isn't a new idea. I didn't just come up with this. I mean, this is something that we see on the federal side. Probation Parole will do a bond study. They'll do a pre-sentence report, talking about biographical details. I just thought maybe we need this from the defense side, and especially in state cases where that type of thing is just never done, at least not in Wisconsin. And, telling the story from the defense perspective, to your point, lets the client lean in and empowers them in this process where they really are the most disempowered person in the courtroom, right? They walk in, it's their first time in court. They don't know what's going to happen. They're so uncertain. And to your kind of stoic approach to this, concentrate on what you can do. You can tell your attorney all about your life story. F. Lee Bailey wrote, I've got all these old, defense horn books that F. Lee Bailey and other greats have written. I've studied those. And in the first section, F. Lee Bailey is telling young defense attorneys, have your client write out their life story. It will be important in trial, but also maybe important in a sentencing. So nothing that I did was a new practice. We just updated it so that clients could do it on their phone, on their laptop, on their own time. Because as you guys know, millennial and Zoomer clients, they don't really actually want to come to your office. They would just as soon do a Zoom or talk to you on their cell phone.
Right. Wow, amazing stuff. All right, listen, it went fast, Dave. We're going to have to take a quick break here on Nothing But the Truth, and we'll be right back.
At the Bianchi Law Group, our team of former prosecutors and certified criminal trial attorneys specialize in criminal defense and domestic violence cases. When you need a law firm with courage, compassion, and the commitment to fight for you, call the Bianchi Law Group today.
So Dan, I think that's very powerful is I found myself telling clients a lot of time, and to the point that you have to understand their psychology. You're right. They're the most disenfranchised person in the entire process. And yet everything is going to happen to them. And so I always say, listen, worry about the things you can control, not the things you can't. You can control who you hire as your lawyer. You can control preparing this narrative as soon as possible. That's the mitigation package. Because to your point, unlike the probation report in federal court, this narrative is going to flow through the whole case. It gets tweaked and modified. It's going to the prosecutor. And eventually, if you get a good resolution, which we're very successful at getting with our mitigation packages, it then gets converted into a sentencing memorandum. The main thing here is that we have found it incredibly powerful to tell that story. We wanted them as prosecutors, and a lot of defense lawyers didn't do them. Big mistake. Now, you found a way to systemize it. Talk to me about that.
Right. So, and I actually found right after you're appointed on a case or retained on a case, the client comes to you with this big worry, and they've never had this big worry. I'm involved in a criminal case. What do I do? Okay, I've signed you up as my lawyer. And then they leave the office, and they generally don't hear from their lawyer in a day or two, or maybe 3. And they're going, wait a minute, I just plunked down a big retainer, or the public defender office just appointed you to my case. What have you done for me yet? And what that client doesn't realize is, well, I don't have the police reports. Our court date's not for 2 or 3 weeks. So there's really little I can do. But by giving them an opportunity to express their own biographical story, you kind of give that football, you empower them, you give that football back to them to run a little bit on their own playing field in their own time. And psychologically, that really works for them. It tends to take the anxiety from this new process off of them. They're not looking to the new lawyer as, hey, why aren't you doing anything? Even though that lawyer has probably explained to them, hey, this is going to take a long time to untie.
Yeah.
And so it's just a great little salve, if you will, psychologically in that early part of the case.
Yeah, Dave, this is so funny that you say this. I mean, honestly, you should be sitting in this office right over here practicing with us. We're thinking exactly alike. There is a big disconnect. You are correct. And you have to understand the client. Again, we get back to psychology. So we've literally created videos that go to the client to re-explain the process, because you're right. When they're initially coming on board, they may not remember. They're nervous. They're scared. They don't understand the process. So I would also recommend to our attorney friends that are listening to this that you do onboarding videos and you have a library where you're educating them. There's materials that they can learn about the criminal justice system. This is all giving them an opportunity to empower themselves while we're getting the reports. Do you do anything like that, Dan, as far as videos and things like that?
I'm despite being this, armchair tech entrepreneur, which I'm not. I don't want to sell software. I just want to make this system for other criminal defense attorneys because I think it's the right way to go. I'm very old school. I'm very mechanical. I mean, I have a tickler on my phone when someone leaves the office. I call them that day and just how's it going? And then I'll try to put a tickler in for a day later or 2 days later, just to go over those points. And again, just everybody in their practice has their own way of doing things. Uh-huh. I think that works for me. If I had a collection of videos, I think that would work as well. So what you guys are doing is phenomenal.
No, listen, the bottom line is you're touching the client and the client knows you care. But tell me about the program. Like if I want to buy this, how would you explain it, or can you show us or tell us where we can find it?
Well, you'd go to justicestory.com and sign up. If you're a National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyer member, you can. We have a promo code for those lawyers. Anybody who listens to this show as well we can work out a promo as well. But justicestory.com is where you go. It's so easy. I made it incredibly easy because, again, I'm not a huge tech guy. I don't want to learn anything. That's the biggest detriment to any new process is, oh, geez, how long is it going to take to learn this whole software? This is as easy as sending an email. I mean, you really just put in your client's name and contact information, pick what type of risk assessments you want that client to undertake, and then push send. And then they get a link. They spend about 70 to 90 minutes on it. And when they're done on their own time, you're notified that the mitigation report is ready to roll.
So when they fill out the information in the survey or questionnaire, does it actually put it into the form in a letter form itself, or is there still review and labor that has to be done by the lawyer?
Well, the lawyer should always edit, right? I mean, we kind of polish these things and they're precious to us, and anything that we're going to use down the line, we want to look at. Yeah. We just instituted a new version which takes out all of the client's grammatical errors, fixes those, punctuation, capitalization. And we've even been able to put first-person narrative into third-person narrative. So it's really court-ready for the most part. AI. The client finishes their survey, you push download, and you've got something that you can present to a prosecutor. And it also comes to you in Word, so you can edit it, you can copy-paste it into your own sentencing memorandum. It's really choose your own adventure. But to your point, Dave, it's ready to roll once the client's done with it.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I know from the mitigation packages that we put together, sometimes we got to excise some of those things that are in there, like the admission, like, I'm sorry for what I did. I love the remorse, sir or madame, but at the same time, let's not give prosecutors admissions in this document too. Right, Tim?
And we don't ask about the offense. We ask what type of offense it is, and that's it. Because that's something that you all, the defense attorney and the client should be talking about, and nobody else should be talking about that, right? And how you explain the offense, that is that is really where we earn our stripes as attorneys. That's not something that I think technology has any place in. So again, we're just explaining the background of how this person got involved in the criminal justice system, what happened in their childhood, what's their family dynamic, how were they educated, if at all? Do they have things like symptoms of PTSD, depression, anxiety, other health issues? All of those things are explored very thoroughly and given to the defense attorney. And frankly, a lot of defense attorneys don't want to use this down the road as a standalone document. They just want to be able to understand their client a little better for their next consultation, when then they can come in with a better formed picture of who this person is and kind of get to the subject matter that may be helpful in that next meeting.
Sure. I think this is a critical conversation for any new lawyers out there, people that are studying what's the appropriate way to advocate. Look, we haven't really talked about the legal side of things, right? I mean, filing motions to suppress, identifying legal issues to exploit and leverage, holding the prosecutor to the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Those are all things that are important too. But it's great to be talking about the humanization and mitigation to supplement those strategies. They work hand in hand, because if you're taking shots at the state's case on the proofs, and then you're also showing how great the client is with hardships, education, employment history, etc., that is what we believe is the right way to strategize and advocate for clients.
Yeah, well, and it's parallel tracks, right? And when you start the case and when somebody comes in and tells you about the case, you know very little about it. And so you don't know if it's a mitigation track or a litigation, meaning fighting track. And you should probably start your case thinking about both of those. Yeah. And what this justice story does for you is kind of front load the mitigation, which frankly, I'm not a very warm and fuzzy guy. I don't know if you can tell that about me, but it's hard for me sometimes to get into that headspace of trying to humanize, when really my focus from the beginning of the case is, how do I beat the government? What are the tools here? What are the facts here that I can use to bang over the government's head and try to break this case open? But again, to our point of 90% of cases going to some type of negotiated resolution, I knew that I needed to do this in a more systematized way. And I built something for myself and later realized other people could probably benefit from it. So that's why we offered Justice Story to other defenders.
Oh, that's
amazing. Can you talk about that? Because look, you had an idea and you were in practice and you're doing the mitigation packages. How did it go from the use that you were in your practice to a systemized application that's out there for sale?
I started out using a really long Google form. Every question that I could think of that, again, I took it from the federal PSR. I added in my own language. It was wonderful, but it was just not ideal. And you can imagine a client getting a Google form from a lawyer. They're probably thinking, this is not ideal. What is this guy doing? But I was able to fashion really nice memos from that Google form, which I had been doing for 3 or 4 years. But when the pandemic hit, I had a group of people that I knew were developers that I could plug in. I could bring them in. They were neighbors of mine. So we just built this thing from scratch, and we were able to find 13 risk assessments, which are academically proven risk assessments about PTSD, life trauma, that type of thing. These are academic resources that are used in counseling offices all over the world, really. And we were able to, and they're open source, so we were able to program those as well. And we just did it. We had the time. And so if you have the time and the resources and a good idea, you might as well try it out. And to date, we have dozens and dozens of lawyers in almost every state using Justice Story. We have public defenders using it. We have a lot of private defenders using it, and almost to a T, they all really like it.
Okay, listen, we have to end the show, but just real quick, what does something like this cost? Is it done per client, or are you selling it to a law firm? Like, how does it work?
Right, so we're selling it to the law firm. It's essentially $40 a month or $400 a year. So it's super cheap. I was actually at the NACDL conference in Las Vegas 3 weeks ago, and the feedback that I got was, whoa, this is way too cheap. And so maybe raising the price. But I want this to be accessible because I really believe that people in the justice system need to have their stories told. And I think that criminal defense lawyers could benefit from Justice Story and just accelerate their practice in a really easy to learn way.
All right.
Without a doubt. Just last point, we are so lucky here at the Bianchi Law Group with the resources that we have in place. We're a team of 7. We have paralegals, we have legal assistants. Not everybody has the resources like that. And for those solos, those entrepreneurs, those people that are running from court to court to court, applications like this, the technology to leverage is definitely something to take a look at.
All right. Dan Adams out of Wisconsin on Nothing But the Truth. Every Saturday at 9:30 on the radio. Dave, podcast drops when?
Yeah, nothingbutthetruthpodcast.com. The website is up and it's updated every single week with all of our new shows. So we're on the radio on Saturdays at 9:30, and then the Wednesday after, the podcast goes into Spotify and iTunes and also YouTube with a video series. So that's nothingbutthetruthpodcast.com. That's the one-stop shop for all those videos.
All right, Dan. Thanks, man. Good luck.
Thanks for having me.
We're the Bianchi Law Group, a team of former prosecutors and certified criminal trial attorneys.
But here's the thing. He put himself in a box when he said...
Relied on by CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Law and Crime, and news leaders across the country for our criminal defense expertise.
In a search warrant, you have to have probable cause that a crime's been committed and there's evidence in a particular place.
When you need a law firm with courage, compassion, and the commitment to fight for you, call the Bianchi Law Group today.